Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Authority Board of Directors meeting on Wednesday, November 9th. In accordance with the California Government Code Section 54953E, in consideration of the coronavirus, members of the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Board of Directors and staff have the option to participate in this meeting by teleconference. Members of the public may also attend this meeting in person or observe this meeting electronically by accessing the meeting via the instructions that are available on our website. The public also has an opportunity to provide comments during the meeting. Members of the public participating remotely and using Zoom may comment during the public meeting or the applicable agenda or on the applicable agenda item by using the raised hand feature, and you will be recognized by the chair. Those using the telephone audio only feature should press star 9 on your phone to initiate the raised hand function in Zoom. You will then be announced unmuted and your time to speak will begin. The public may provide comment on any matter listed on the agenda. Speakers are customarily limited to 3 minutes each. However, the board chair may increase or decrease the time allotted to each speaker based on the number of speakers, the length of the agenda, and the complexity of the subject matter. Speaking time will not be decreased to less than 1 minute. And with that, may we have a roll call, please?
Yes, thank you. I will begin with you, Chair Gibbons.
Here.
Vice Chair Tyson.
Here.
Director Willie.
Here.
Director Abe-Koga.
Here.
Director Walia.
Here.
Director Flagger.
Here.
Director Rennie. Director Rennie.
Here.
Thank you. Director Chua.
Here.
Director Elahi.
Present.
Director Klein.
Here.
Director Lee.
Present.
Thank you. And I will note that Director Martinez Beltran and Director Armendariz are currently absent, but we do have a quorum.
Thank you very much. And at this time, we will have public comment on matters not listed on the agenda. The public may provide comments on any matter not listed on the agenda, provided that it is within the subject matter jurisdiction of Silicon Valley Clean Energy. Speakers are customarily limited to 3 minutes each. However, the board chair may increase or decrease the time allotted to each speaker based on the number of speakers, the length of the agenda, and the complexity of the subject matter. Speaking time will not be decreased to less than 1 minute. Madam Clerk, do we have any raised hands from the public?
No, Chair, I see none.
Okay, I would agree with that one. So thank you. We will now move to the agenda item consent calendar. This is an action item by the board for items 1A through 1M. Do we have any comments, questions on the consent from the board or the public? And seeing none, may we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I move that we approve the consent calendar items 1A through 1M.
Second. Okay, I saw the motion was from Director Flagger, and I didn't see who made the second.
I did.
Chua, thank you, Director
you.
Chua. With that, may we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Chair Gibbons.
Aye.
Vice Chair Tyson.
Yes.
Director Willie.
Here. Yes.
Abe-Koga.
Aye.
Walia.
Aye.
Flagger.
Yes.
Rennie.
Aye.
Chua.
Aye.
Elahi.
Aye.
Klein.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries with Director Martinez Beltran and Armendariz absent.
Excellent, thank you. And it is delightful to have so many here in chambers this evening. Thank you very much, along with our Executive Director, Girish Balachandran. And we will now have the CEO report.
Thank you, Chair Gibbons.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Gibbons, members of the board. It's fantastic to be here in person and see several of you. I'd like to start by introducing our newest employee, Sitlali Sandoval. She is our Senior Regulatory Advisor, and she will be reporting to Maren Wenzel in Monica Padilla's Power Supply Group. So we got her from, she used to work in Clean Power San Francisco, which is the CCA run by SFPUC. And prior to that, she worked for the CPUC. Sitlali, would you please introduce yourself to the board?
Hello, yes. Hi, I'm very happy to be here and to meet you all virtually. As Girish said, I previously worked for San Francisco CCA and I'll be on the 4Pro team. And one of the reasons why I wanted to start working for SVCE is because I was first exposed to some of the awesome team members through our trade association, Cal CCA, and I noticed that on all of the Cal CCA calls, the SVCE staff was always a thought leader and really had a hand in developing Cal CCA's position. So that's what attracted me to the organization. And in terms of my hobbies and interests outside of work, I'm very interested in anything having to do with keeping active and physical fitness. I think I was probably a physical therapist in another life. And thank you for the opportunity to introduce myself.
Well, welcome, Sitlali. It's so delightful to have you bring experience from San Francisco and the CPUC to our organization, but in particular, your exposure to the organization and having such high regard for the relationships and what you observed. So welcome, and we're delighted to have you.
Thank you.
I'll continue with a couple more updates. We'll be bringing to the executive committee at their Monday meeting. We'll talk about the Brown Act and Governor Brown's executive order expiring on February 28th. So we'll provide some information and some options that then the executive committee can guide us on communicating with the board, most likely in December and January. So we are preparing for that. You've all received an invitation to attend a ribbon cutting ceremony near the city of Lancaster. It's a project called Rabbit Brush. It's a solar storage project. And we've entered into that project along with 3CE. The project came online on October 18th. That's the fifth one of our projects that have come online this year. So all the work from 2017 and 18 in terms of RFPs, et cetera, these things are coming to fruition. Please indicate your interest. Even if you're a maybe, please indicate your interest to Andrea via email. At your seats, you have a hard copy of our updated strategic work plan. As per public comment and board guidance, we did change this strategic plan to have it be more customer focused. So you'll see that we talk about our communities, the benefits that SVCE has brought into the region, and we've changed the way we've presented our work plan so that it's hopefully more understandable. And then, of course, for someone who's not staff and in the weeds of what we do. We'll be mailing a copy to board members and alternates, but I just wanted to give the 5 of you an advance copy today. My last item as an update is at the next board meeting, we plan on having a reception here prior to the meeting at 5:30 p.m. for all the board members, alternates, and friends of the board, so to speak. We will be losing some of our board members who will be moving on to either other responsibilities in their city council or to other things. So we wanted to recognize the service that they've provided to SVCE. So that'll be at 5:30 on December 14th. Look out for a calendar hold in the next day or two, and then an email to follow with details. With that, that's the end of my report, Chair Gibbons.
Thank you very much. So wonderful to know that the projects are coming live. That is just spectacular. So thank you for staff for making all of that happen. We will now move on to item number 3, adopt a resolution authorizing the Chief Executive Officer to execute the power supply contract with the California Community Choice Financing Authority and related supporting agreements. This is an action, and our staff presentation will be by CFO and Director of Administrative Services, Amrit Singh.
Thank you, Chair Givens. Good evening, directors. I am pleased to bring the second prepaid transaction for approval now. We'll begin with Andrea going to the second slide. Before I begin, I just want to mention that joining us today is Mike Berwenger from PFM Financials. Mike was with us. He was our financial advisor with the first prepay, and he's also our financial advisor for this prepay. And he's available for any detailed questions the board members may have. So as stated here, the purpose today is to authorize the CEO to execute or approve the prepay agreements. If you remember last month at the October meeting, we got board approval to engage in our second prepay transactions. We asked the board to approve contracts to engage with consultants such as Mike and other legal members to help us structure and negotiate these transactions, and to also engage with Morgan Stanley as a prepaid bank supplier. So we're now in the position to bring those agreements for approval to the board, and we'll go through the parameters that the board will authorize upon which the execution will be contingent upon. And the reason for the quick turnaround, again, is we are leveraging the first prepay structure. If you remember, we spent more than 2 years structuring and negotiating that. So we are basically replicating that structure, and therefore we were able to move on this second transaction fairly quickly. So what I have planned for today is to go through a recap of what our goals are, what the structure is. Again, I'll go through what the board authorized parameters are upon which we'll execute the deal. We'll talk about a little bit about next steps. But I also want to point out that in the appendix, I have a lot of detailed information, summary of the transactional documents that the board will give authority for execution. The estimated fees, again, these fees are contingent on the deals executing, with the exception of the credit rating agency fee that we discussed last time. And we also have details on the first prepay transaction and the cost breakdown. And the last slide, I have a more detailed overview of how the prepay structure works and some background information on power prepays or prepays in general. We went through this in detail last year when we executed a first deal, and I'll be certainly happy to go through that structure again or a review of that if anyone wants me to do so. Okay, so we'll begin with the next slide. So just a quick recap. This is a structure that enables us to get substantial savings with very little to no risks, very little risks. The goal is to reduce the cost of power purchases by taking advantage of the fact that as a governmental entity, we have access to low-cost tax-exempt debt without actually taking on the debt ourselves. And just to point out that this is leveraging our competitive advantage that we have relative to the investor-owned utilities, because they do not have, as a taxable entity, they do not have access to tax-exempt debt. So how do we do this? We are able to basically take the difference between the taxable debt and the tax-exempt debt interest rates and capture that savings into our energy power purchases. So when you have a taxable entity like Morgan Stanley, who, if they were to access the capital markets for capital, they would have to borrow at a higher rate. We, as a tax-exempt entity, can borrow at a lower rate. And we're by using what we call a financially engineered prepay structure, also otherwise known as structured finance, we're able to capture that savings and flow it into our power purchases that we kind of route through the prepay structure. Okay, but the essence of this is that the bonds that are issued are not guaranteed by SVCE. They're not our obligations, nor they're limited obligations to CCCFA. And for the most part, they're backed by the contractual rights, the transactions that we execute, and the transaction cash flows secured by a trust indenture. So that is what's backing up these bonds. And if there's any issues, I think I mentioned this last time, all roads will lead to Morgan Stanley. So we do not take on any debt on our balance sheet. These are non-recourse debt. And this structure, as we discussed in the past, has been around since the 1990s, has been used extensively in the gas prepaid transactions. And we were one of the first CCAs, along with East Bay, to execute one for clean power purchases. And now, as we talked about last month, there are a number of CCAs. Since we've executed, there's been at least 2 other prepaids that have been executed in the CCA community, and there are a number of CCAs that are pursuing it, and 2 other CCAs recently got CCCFA approval to execute their prepays. Again, this is minimal risk to us. The fees that we pay to our consultants and the attorneys are contingent on the execution of the deal, and they're paid out of the bond proceeds. So anytime we talk about the savings target, they're net of these fees. And as I mentioned, the bonds are non-recourse to us. Minimal risk, if anything, if the structure for any reason falls apart, the power transaction we assign into the prepay reverts back to us. And the risk is that we just lose the time we invested in it, and we go back to business as we were doing it before the prepay structure. Okay, so I'll go to the next slide, Andrea. So the request today is to grant authority for the CEO to execute the transactional agreements or provide approval. Some of the agreements will be executed by CCCFA. And the deal is contingent upon that the principal amount of bonds will not exceed $1 billion. This is a large amount. You may say last prepay, when we had 2 CCAs, we were partnering with East Bay, was for almost this amount, slightly larger than this amount. That's because the power prices have been significantly higher. And then also, this is the maximum amount that we will not exceed. Chances are we will come in probably below that. Our current expectation is somewhere around $750 million. The bonds will be issued by CCCFA, California Community Choice Financing Authority, and they're not our obligations. The energy overall savings target that we're aiming for is 8% during the initial term of the bonds. This is the minimum savings threshold. And if the market opportunity is there, we will certainly try to get more than this. But the actual savings, which has to meet this minimum threshold, otherwise we'll have to come back to the board. But the actual savings will depend on the spread between taxable and tax-exempt bond at the time of the pricing of the bonds. This transaction will cover about roughly about 12% of our load. The first transaction covered about 10 to 11% of our load. As I mentioned, the actual realized discount will depend on the spread between the taxable and tax-exempt. On a dollar basis, this could amount to between $3 to $4 million of savings. So this is a sizable amount of savings for us. Again, these will be 30-year bonds. The initial term of the bonds will be somewhere between 5 to 10 years. And the way we decide what the timing is of the initial bonds, the bonds itself will be 30 years, but they will reset. In other words, essentially we will be refinancing them either in somewhere between 5 to 10 year period. And the way we decide what length of the bond is, we'll look at the market yields and where we get the most benefit, most sizable spread. That's the tenor of the initial term of the bonds that we will establish. And then once the initial bonds reset, then the discount in the future will depend on the then prevailing market conditions, whatever the spread is between the taxable and tax exempt bond at that time. And there is a repricing agreement that's part of the package of documents we sent out that will establish a minimum threshold. We will establish this threshold as we get closer to the bond pricing time, but our expectation is to be somewhere around 4%. Okay, we'll go to the next slide, Andrea. So next step, what happens after we get our approval today? We will have to seek approval from the CCCFA board, and we are on plan to do that at the December 1st meeting of CCCFA. At that point, we will be in position to issue the bonds in December. But given the holidays, the likelihood is that the execution will probably be sometime in late January or even later if the market conditions are not there. If we're not able to get our target savings, the window of opportunity can open up, it can close. The market is volatile. We want to be in a position that when we can realize our target savings, we are able to act on it. I think that's the last slide before we seek board approval. So I will, Andrea, maybe we can go to that slide and I'll be happy to take questions at this point. One addition to note in seeking approval, we are asking that the board give the approval with the ability for the CEO to make any minor clarifying modification to contracts as necessary. Sometimes we find terms that we need to iron out that doesn't really change the intent or the overall economics of the transaction. So we want that level of flexibility. Yeah, I'll be happy to take any questions at this point.
Thank you, Amrit. I appreciate this last slide with the emphasis that the board's authorization does have parameters to it. So it's not just an open book. Are there any questions? Yes, Vice Chair Tyson.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. I think it helps that I saw the first round of this a year ago. So Amrit, my question is, around 10 or 11% of our load a year ago, 12% now, assuming that terms continue to be favorable, should we see you again next year? Is there a natural limit where you don't want to go beyond in terms of percent of load, or how will we decide when enough is enough of this?
Yes, you will see me again with more prepays because this is it's a good way to get savings. It's very hard to gain margins on commodity business. So this is a wonderful way to get a competitive advantage. So yes, you will see us again. We will probably target somewhere around 60-70%. But that's not an exact optimized number. We will work on that number. What we have to balance is the load. We want to make sure our load is always there to meet the prepay volumes under the prepay structure. And we have to look at our generation is intermittent. So there's some level of natural, we cannot, for example, assign 100% of our PPAs into the prepay. We assign them at something like 95 percentile level of certainty of generation. So that leaves a lot of volumes that doesn't get assigned into the prepay. So we have to optimize through some of that level of analytics.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Elahi.
Thank you. Amrit, I'm glad you're working on this. I mean, that's almost a no-brainer for when you're a tax-saving entity, but that's great that you're doing it. My question is, if some of the contracts that we have that are going into the prepay, if those people are not able to deliver, or those contracts cancel out for some reason, what happens?
So if a contract that's assigned into the prepay fails to deliver, we can substitute that with another PPA or another contract So we will have to have an underlying power contract assigned into the prepay structure. So if one contract falls apart, we have the ability to go back with Morgan Stanley, CCCFA, and per the assignment agreement that we have in the prepay documents, we'll be able to assign another contract into the structure.
I mean, but what happens if the terms of the other contracts are not as favorable as the one that was already in there? Or if you don't have another contract to sign at that point?
Well, we will have contracts. If we have load, we will have contracts, or we will execute contracts to meet our load. The key is we have load to serve. If we don't have load to serve, then we've got a bigger problem. So if we have load, we will have contracts. So we will have energy to assign into the prepay. The terms of the underlying prepay, for the most part, is immaterial. It's basically a pass-through energy that goes into. The terms of the PPA's pricing doesn't really affect the economics of the prepay transaction. The way the prepay is structured, it works off of the index pricing, and then we settle the differences off of the index price. So underlying PPA could be any price. It doesn't affect the economics of the prepay.
So I guess that might be a reason to not put all your load into the prepay in case you have to assign a contract into the prepay. If you're 100% prepaid already, you won't have it to assign. So that might be a reason to leave a little bit of load.
Yeah.
All right. And I guess an appropriate amount of room, because depending on what the size of the prepay contract is.
Exactly. Yeah, we're nowhere near that threshold, but as we execute more and more, those are the type of the issues we'll be optimizing for.
Okay, thank you.
And that goes directly to Vice Chair Tyson's question before. What's the amount that we would go up to, and what's the cushion we want to have based on our load? So all of that will be calculated as we get up in the percentages of the prepay agreement. And I just wanted to check a quick question. The 3 to 4 million is a savings per year?
Yes, that's our target. Yeah, or that's what we think the 8% would materialize into.
Okay, good. Thank you. Are there any other questions from the board? I see Director Willie.
Yeah, thank you. Good presentation, Emrit. My question would kind of be, when we start talking about bonds, I'm, kind of usually concerned about interest rate fluctuations and the value of those bonds as those things fluctuate. How does that impact? Yes, we're relying just on the difference between the tax and the tax exempt rate, but because we're dealing with a commodity of, bonds, would the value of those bonds decrease or increase as the Fed is changing interest rates, or is it truly immaterial? It just seems like it would be hard to understand that it wouldn't be a factor. So what are your thoughts?
So at the time we execute, those dynamics make a difference. At the time we execute, we care about the spread between the two bonds rates. That drives our economics. But once it's executed, yes, the underlying value of the bonds will fluctuate up and down, but that's the risk the bond holder faces. They've already given CCCFA money. CCCFA has given Morgan Stanley the money. The debt has been raised. The bondholder takes the risk of the fluctuation in interest rate movements.
Great. That I think puts it in perspective for me. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands raised from the board members. Seeing none, I'll move to the public. Are there any questions from our public? I do not see any hands raised in the public. Okay. And then we will come back to the board. And Director Chua, I see your hand raised.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to make a motion that
Hmm?
okay?
And
Motion.
may I, sorry, I was going to say, could we put the slide back up with the,
I'm okay.
you're okay? Okay, thank you. Please go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt Resolution 2022-30, authorizing the CEO to execute power supply contract with the CCCFA and execute or approve the related supporting agreements to enable SVCE to enter the approximately 30-year energy prepayment transaction with amendments authorizing the CEO to make minor adjustments to the contract.
That was brilliantly done. Director Elahi?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Thank you. We have a motion by Director Chua and a second by Director Elahi. May we have a roll call, please?
Yes, thank you. Chair Gibbons,
Aye.
Vice Chair Tyson,
Yes.
Director Willie,
Aye.
Abe Koga,
Aye.
Walia,
Aye.
Flagger,
Yes.
Rennie,
Aye.
Chua,
Aye.
Elahi,
Aye.
Klein,
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries unanimously with 2 directors absent.
Thank you very much, Amrit. That was well done and exciting for Silicon
Thank
Valley
you.
Clean Energy customers. All right, we are now on to item number 4, which is the Community Resilience Program Update. This is a presentation, and this will be by Zoe Elizabeth, Deputy Director of Decarbonization Programs and Policy, and she'll be joined by Jessica Coneo, I think I'm saying that correctly, Program Specialist, Policy and Government Initiatives. Ladies?
Good evening. We are so excited to get to share with you an update on the Community Resilience Program. It's been a little while since we've talked about this program, but Jessica and I have had the great pleasure of working with staff across all your agencies, and you're doing a number of really exciting projects. So I am going to give a quick just recap of what the program is, and then Jess is going to walk through the actual programs that are ongoing throughout your communities. Next slide. Okay, I think I just stated this, so we're here just to provide an update. So just some background. So this program was approved as part of the Customer Relief and Community Resilience package in response to the COVID-19 in 2020. So there was $5 million that was set aside specifically for community energy resilience. These funds were then combined with an existing allocation. We had put aside about $150,000 to support analysis and planning. So we just combined those to have a comprehensive program. Next slide. And so I'm going to go into a little bit of the details, but just wanted to also kind of pause. Resilience is one of these big words. It can mean a lot of different things, from, when we think about climate resilience, from sea level rise to heat mitigation, a lot of things. So one, to really focus at this project, or in this program, focuses on energy resilience, focuses on reducing the likelihood and the impacts of power outages. We were really responding and thinking a lot about PSPS events when we first initiated the program. And then also, to make sure that we have the biggest impact, we focus on SVCE's area of influence, which is really the last mile of energy resilience, that site level, what happens at community centers, at senior centers, at schools, really at site level resilience. This can enhance the work that PG&E is doing to increase overall grid reliability, but it's not a replacement. So we just want to kind of emphasize that. We're really focused on that last mile. Next slide, please. So here's the big picture overview of everything that is in the program. And today, again, we're going to really talk about the planning grants and the capital project grants that your agencies are undertaking. But the overarching, we've got just over $1 million for the program. We put a little over $1 million specifically into planning, which included some technical assistance and tools that Jessica will talk about. And then we set aside $4 million in capital project grants. A reminder to folks that the way that we allocated the funds was that it was based on load per agency. So we set aside funds for each agency based on your proportion of load. And here up there's the deadline. Everybody's on track right now, but funds to be spent for planning by the end of this year, and the capital funds to be spent by the end of 2023. Next slide. Great. And so at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Jessica, who's got the good news of all the cool things that are happening.
Great. Thanks, Zoe. Good evening, board. Next slide, please. So very exciting news today. So all of our member agencies either have an active project or have either completed their projects. For the tally, we currently have 6 agencies who are in the planning stages of their resiliency projects. We have 6 who are currently constructing their projects, and we have 2 member agencies who have completed their projects entirely. As you could see from the table, many of our member agencies are utilizing solar plus battery storage and resilient EV charging for their specific resiliency capital projects. But as the agencies who are currently in their planning phase move on to the construction phase, we plan that there'll be a variety of different programs to arise. Next slide. So we wanted to highlight the 2 rockstar cities who have completed their projects. The first we wanted to highlight is the city of Milpitas for their solar plus battery project at their community and senior center. So Monica, Garish, and I had the lovely time at the ribbon cutting back in April of this year. And so just a few highlights of the project. The community center was outfitted with a solar plus battery storage, which provides backup to the building in case of an emergency event. Additionally, the building is outfitted with smart controls, which means it could be used as a cooling or a heating center during extreme weather events. A few additional building upgrades include EV chargers, LED lightings, and smart control dashboards inside the facility to display real-time energy usage data for city staff. Next slide. Secondly, we have the city of Saratoga. So they utilized their grant funds to outfit 15 of their intersections with battery backup systems. So what these batteries will do is that it will allow the street signals to be operational during a power outage. They can also be controlled by city staff, which is going to be really useful in case of evacuations, because the staff will be able to control the street signals during evacuation. Next slide. Moving forward, we will continue to support each of our member agencies. So our commitment and support doesn't stop at the grants. We also developed a decision support tool specifically for the member agencies to identify critical community sites within their jurisdictions for future resiliency projects. Additionally, a lot going on in the state. So the state has committed over $100 million for community resiliency grants. And so we have tracked these grants and shared these opportunities with your staff so that they could leverage these resources in the event that they would like to apply for some statewide grants as well. All right. Next slide. And that is the end of our presentation, and we are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. It's always exciting to see programs moving forward with real progress. Are there any comments from any of the board members? I see no raised hands. Any comments from the public? I see no raised hands. And this is a presentation with no action. So with that, I will simply say thank you. Delighted to have this update and look forward to spending more of that money. We will now move on to item number 5, which is the new construction reach code update. This is also a presentation. And Zoe Elizabeth, Deputy Director of Decarbonization Programs and Policy, will make this presentation as well. Zoe?
Okay, wonderful. More good news I get to share with you all. So this is the monthly reach code update. You can go to the next slide. And I'm here as I am each month to provide a quick status update and highlight upcoming actions. I have to say before going on to the slide of highlighting things that have been going on, we've got some charts and kind of dates that are coming up, but really can't even convey in the slide deck presentation how much work and how your wonderful staff and communities and all of you as directors and your fellow council members have been doing over the last month to consider reach codes, to take in public comment, participate in a number of meetings. Tony, Peter, and I have been attending meetings throughout the community. It's been absolutely inspirational to see the work and the engagement that folks have on this issue. So, and just a couple slides, but also really a big thank you to all of you for your continued engagement on this important initiative. Next slide. Okay, so here's a quick overview, right? And this is kind of, this is like the preview to as we get towards the finale, as folks are finishing up their votes really this month. When we come back in December, we'll have even, final information, but just a quick overview. Can see here, many of our jurisdictions, as you'll see in the next slide, have moved from codes that had some electrification or mostly electrification to considering all electric. Campbell there, right at the top, has introduced an all electric code, which is a big step from where they were in the last code cycle. Milpitas is also considering all electric, moving from electric preferred in the last code cycle. Monte Sereno has introduced a mostly electric, also taking a big step up from their electric preferred in the last code cycle. So a lot of movement again and engagement and working with all of your communities. And then also our cities who were active in the previous code cycle already had electric, still making refinements and doing work to make sure that the codes can be really implemented and meet their intention. Next slide. Okay, so here's another way of just getting a sense of what each jurisdictions are doing. You can really see here how the majority of our jurisdictions are considering both electric codes and the transportation electrification, the EV reach codes. And we've got three cities here that are focused just on one or the other, in Gilroy EV reach code and Los Altos Hills focused really on building code. And two jurisdictions that also, Mountain View and Santa Clara County, that also include expanded PV in their code. So another way of understanding this. And the next slide. And this here, my screen, the words are a little bit small. Hopefully y'all can see them, but this just gives again another view of the different size bubbles, the different codes that folks are looking at. So you can see that the biggest bubble there is the all electric code. But I think what's also really important is we see, there you go, thank you, that dark purple, which is introduced all electric. When that code is passed, maybe when we come back in December, those are two cities that have moved further than they did in the last code cycle. And that we expect that if passed, that green bubble would grow even bigger. And the same thing, there's that light green, mostly electric right there, which also we would expect to expand as there's right next to it that light purple, which is introduced mostly electric. We never as we all know, we're experiencing a national level right now. We don't ever count our chickens before they've hatched. So we're those that are introduced, we're still considering them introduced. And the next slide, please. Okay, so this should look really familiar, and really all of you, we've checked this off. Maybe this is like the big celebration here. Next month, maybe we can have check marks. We've really met all of these deadlines the votes obviously got pushed back a little bit past the 31st, but everyone is still on track to make that the CEC's deadline. So after the votes, a lot of the work then will come back to your staff and to SVCE staff to help support moving papers through the administrative process for final approval with the CEC where necessary. And the next slide. So here I won't go through each of these dates. We mostly want to provide them to you all so you can see where your fellow council members when they're voting. We also provide links to those council sessions if you're interested or looking at those staff reports. You can see here too, we've got two, Cupertino and Sunnyvale, who have completed. They've had 2 votes. They have passed. I think Cupertino was the, or I guess, no, sorry, they did both the same night, Cupertino and Sunnyvale. So I don't know what time, who actually got first. I think it was Cupertino, but I don't want to say for sure. So we've got two that fully passed, and the rest will be in the next couple of weeks, and some moving into, I think, the latest in mid-December. So that's it. I'm happy as always to answer any questions that you have now. And of course, we are also available for you, your council members, and your staff as you move towards your second reading.
Well, this is always the highlight of my night to see how much progress we're making in this area. So very much appreciate these updates. And Director Elahi.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Zoe. She was there at our council meeting, and there's always somebody who has some objections to whether it makes any sense for us to do any climate change, do anything to fight that, because China and India are going the other way. So, but I really appreciated Zoe being there and help answer some of those questions. So thank you, Zoe. Great job.
Yeah, absolutely. It's our pleasure.
Thank you. Yes, Director Walia.
Thank you, Chair Gibbons. I would also like to express a word of thanks to staff for the tremendous outreach they have done throughout the year. They worked directly with me, with our staff in Saratoga. And again, Tony, thank you so much for attending council meeting I believe it was last week, and sitting through our long meeting. The support is much appreciated to help us find the right balance for Saratoga so that we keep on moving forward in this correct direction. Thank you so much.
Director Abikoga.
Thank you, Chair. I also want to echo the thanks to staff for their hard work and really driving the process and being very accessible and working with our city staff and keeping us updated too. I think that was very helpful to show us where we were and where we needed to go. I know in our conversation when we discussed this and voted on it, I think it was last week or 2 weeks, I can't remember when exactly, but there's a discussion about what's next and some interest actually in looking at more more reach codes or more changes that we could perhaps do mid-cycle, so not waiting 3 more years to do the next set. And so I believe our staff will be reaching out to SVCE staff on that and on what options we have. There's one in particular that came up about how apparently landscape designers have noticed that some folks, when they're redoing their backyards, want to add gas lines for an outdoor stove or oven, and looking at banning or eliminating that. And so that was something that my colleague asked if we could look at doing before the next 3-year cycle comes up. So definitely there's interest. It's exciting to see the change, much more support from the community I saw. And I think that, definitely helps us move forward and move more quickly, which is really of importance that we double down on combating climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands. We'll go to the public comment. I see no raised hands from the public. We'll come back to the board. And I would like to also share great appreciation for the consistent commitment by staff to outreach to all of our communities. It made a huge difference in my community, and I think we included no outside gas in ours. I think we did. I'm going to have to double check. But we also had a very engaged community meeting where staff, Tony, and others were participating, and I had very, very positive feedback from anyone who attended that felt like their questions were respected and answered. And you can't ask for more than that. So Silicon Valley Clean Energy represented the mission of the organization superbly well in all of these efforts. So thank you. And I think we will accept that presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you all.
Thank you. And now we come to the portion of the meeting, which is the board members' announcements and direction on future board agenda items. Are there any comments, announcements? I don't see any. I'll just offer that I had a busman's holiday, if you will, not last weekend, but the weekend before. The California Council of the American Institute of Architects does a very special event every 2 years. It's called the Monterey Design Festival, or Monterey Design Conference. And it's a festival because it's all architects, and I love it, love the conversations. And we had presentations from literally all over the world: China, Japan, India, Italy, and just everywhere, South America. It was just phenomenal. And one of the events was going out to dinner, and I had a very engaged conversation with 12 different architects, all of whom had a different opinion about electrification of the built environment. So I was put through my paces. I think I held myself up fairly well, but I'm really glad we have our new strategic plan, because I'm going to send that out to everybody. So thank you to staff for pulling this together and everything that's being done. And I think I saw, yes, I did. Director Flygore.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to thank Garish and Benna for participating in the Cal Cities Peninsula Division Resiliency Climate Change event a couple weeks ago. No surprise, they did an excellent job, and it was a very informative and engaging session. And it was really great just having our very own, SVCE representatives there and representing the organization well. So big thank you to Garish and Benna for putting together a great presentation.
Well, on such wonderful positive notes, we will adjourn this meeting until the next meeting on December 14th. And please check your calendars for any subcommittee meetings, executive board meetings in the interim. Thank you.